No one's saying everyone has to be an absolute vegan who walks everywhere and doesn't fly. Like, sustainable aviation fuel. We can totally make sustainable aviation fuel. There was electric cars before there was petrol cars. It's all doable. What we get is clean water, clean air, longer life, quieter environments. Like, it's all upside. Why should we burn coal up at Newcastle to pollute up there and ship it down a line to us when I can get it on my roof? Not all of it, so we need batteries. Like, we need different technologies. Right now, the efficiency of that system to burn so much coal and send it down the lines in the hope that you're going to turn on this light and this equipment, like, we waste so much in that process. There is so much inefficiency in that. The amount of energy that hits Sydney each day from the sun could power the earth. So we've not no shortage of energy. Like, we know there's lots in the ground as well, and we'll use that to make stuff we really, really need. But we can also tap into these other energy sources. We have some of the lowest fuel efficiency standards of the world. And partly because we've got lots of sky, right? We've got lots of air to throw it into. But Jakarta, no way. Like, the fuel efficiency really, really genuinely matters there.
Welcome back to the Adventures podcast. Like I mentioned, we're back in Sydney, our second and final episode for this trip, Mazza.
Yep.
The first podcast is completely different to this guest. Very, very different. I am going to mention your name, Mick. I am not going to introduce him. I'm going to make him introduce himself, but I am going to mention his name. All right, Mick, you ready?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Mick Liubinskas.
Liubinskas. Not bad. That was pretty good. 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10.
Take that.
If you can guess what country it's from, I do the moonwalk. That's my standard bet. So you got three guesses.
Is it Eastern European?
It's Eastern European.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I'll leave that as a non-guess. But yeah, exactly. It's close. Basketballing nation. Oh no.
What did we say?
Big basketballing nation.
Serbian?
No, it used to be big. I actually had struggled in the last couple of years.
Come on, Mazza, help me out here.
Yeah.
Well, my first guess was going to be Polish, but I don't think that's going to be right.
Neighbours are Lithuania.
Lithuania.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Lithuania. So my grandmother.
The neighbour next door.
My 100-year-old grandmother's still alive.
Wow.
And came over to Australia after World War II.
Does she live in the village?
She lives in Central Coast. So yeah, nearby.
Right. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah.
But please introduce yourself.
Oh, thanks.
Go for it.
So, Mick Liubinskas. I am happily married for 18 years, dad of 3 kids.
3 kids.
I am a total geeky nerd who got into computers very young, got into the web before browsers, started doing web development, built a web development company in the late 90s.
Wow, back in the days.
Got into tech startups, and 2002 to 2004, I ran marketing for Kazaa, a big peer-to-peer file sharing company globally, trying to turn it into Spotify and Netflix. A bit early. Started a startup accelerator incubator called Pollenizer. We did about 25 companies over about 5 years. Went to Telstra and helped them set up a tech accelerator called Mirror D. That took me to the US. And then my best friend in the world said, hey, it's time. We actually played a lot about basketball together. And I said, hey, your job just got a bit harder. A certain person pulled out of the Paris Agreement. And he said, maybe it's time you got in the game, which is basketball talk for get off the bench and get in the game. I looked at my 3 kids and went, I was trying to find something to do with the rest of my life, a bit of midlife crisis. And I was like, wow, sustainability and new energy and clean tech, that's something I can sink my teeth into. Moved back to Australia 2019, just pre-COVID. And 2 weeks ago, I started Climate Salad as a way to tell stories of the Australian climate tech companies, like people building solutions for climate technology. It's called Climate Salad. It started purely with the goal of me doing a once-a-month newsletter. So be really careful running a podcast, right? You never know where it's going to take you, right? And now we have a staff of 5. We've got 625 companies. We've done 10 trade missions, 2 international programs. We've got 1,000 members, 10,000 followers in just over 3 years. So the whole industry is totally and utterly taken off, which is great, but lots more work to do.
Can you explain climate tech? Because we were chatting through. I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is that
What's your guess? What's your
something?
What would you say
like
if you're someone
supporting climate, stopping climate change through tech or something?
Technology that I guess is has a sustainability ilk to it.
Yeah,
I'm assuming.
So it's we talk about scalable solutions to environmental problems,
Right.
and we think about 4 big problems. So we've got to reduce the emissions going out there. So every time you eat a veggie burger versus a meat burger, it's less methane. Every time you walk instead of driving, that's less carbon dioxide. Every time you use a electric stove instead of a gas stove, that's less nitrous oxide. So less emissions going out. That's the first one. The second one is we've got to remove emissions that are already out there. We've polluted the world too much, so we've got to suck up those emissions with natural means like sequestration, more seaweed, more forests, more soil and mushrooms, and we also got to do technology, so carbon capture and storage. The third one is adaptation and resilience. We've all recognised that the world environment has already changed. It's too late. We need to adapt to the environment. We need technology to do that. And the fourth one is natural capital. So actually valuing the environment. So flora, fauna, clean air, clean water, biodiversity. So anything that invests in supporting those things. So across those four big areas. And scalable, we want to solve the world's problems. We don't want to do, you might start small, but we want to go and solve big problems.
Mick, I could tell you've been around. Right, it seems like you've done a lot.
That was the very first time I've ever said that. I've said that 3 times today, so it's all right. It's,
I could tell.
I've got no shortage of telling these
You're
stories.
a man on a mission. You've done a lot in tech. You went into tech when tech was about to boom, so you went into it perfectly.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, right up front, there's a lot of people that don't believe in climate change.
Yeah.
What would you say to people like that?
Yeah, look, I'm 3/4 of the way through a Masters of Sustainable Development, so trying to add some cred to what I've read. We've got 8 billion people on the planet. We're consuming resources at massive rates, and we're polluting it. Like we are consuming so many resources that it's just not sustainable, and that's the issue. So it's very, very complicated. Like in one of my first ever studies, I looked at the oceans and how the water moves around and heating and cooling and acidification. It's like 3 degrees and 20 years of research just to understand ocean heating, let alone all of the climate dynamics. But when did we stop trusting scientists? It's like, why are we trusting scientists over fossil fuel companies? So absolutely for me, I think we've already seen the early signs of it. Eunice Foote, actually, a female scientist, did the first studies in 1856. ExxonMobil's board absolutely knew about climate change back in the 70s and decided to hush it to make more money. The environment's changing. There's not going to be a single moment. There's not going to be one storm or one fire or anything like that. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And 5 million people die a year from air pollution.
Really?
5 million people. If you eat seafood once a month, you eat a credit card of plastic. Some of the things are really scary, and I try not to focus on that. I'm not telling everyone to go and sit and go to a farm and grow beans and stop living. I love my life. I love what we've created here. We've just got to make a few changes. We can live sustainably. Instead of getting an Uber here, I jumped on one of the bikes and walked across the bridge. I got a bus this morning. Small changes, a little bit less meat, a little bit more veggies. No one's saying everyone has to be an absolute vegan that walks everywhere and doesn't fly. Sustainable aviation fuel. We can totally make sustainable aviation fuel. There was electric cars before there was petrol cars. It's all doable. So what's and what we get is clean water, clean air, longer life, quieter environments. It's all upside. So the only thing fighting against it is if you own $1 billion worth of fossil fuel assets.
That's what it comes down to. It's always money, though. Exxon, you mentioned, it's all about money.
And people see this and will. There's lots of data to refute it, right? You can always make that up. But I've looked at it a long time, I've trusted, and I've seen and looked around. The human impact on the world is pretty significant.
What do you have to say to those people then who say that electric cars, the amount of to produce lithium for the batteries and all that kind of stuff? You've heard that argument before.
Absolutely.
What's your rebuttal to all that to say, okay, well, at the end of the day, and you have people who talk about, fuel isn't an infinite supply. Now, we travel a lot to the Middle East, and you speak to the people over there, and they're like, hey, there's a shit ton of fuel right there that we haven't even tapped into. So all your hoopla doopla about fuels coming to an end, there's a truckload more where that came from. So we can, the next few 100 years can be run through all that. So what's your take from that perspective? Is it like the likes of Elon Musk get up and say, well, you know what, because the climate change narrative supports my back pocket, I'm going to keep pushing this out? Was if he wasn't producing Tesla lithium batteries, well, it doesn't support his narrative, so why would he push that agenda?
Yeah, there's definitely loaded, right? There is. It is impossible to have any single person in the world. I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing it for my own reasons. I'm running a company. I'm not making a ton of profit. So that's not my logic to do it. And it is really, really, really complicated. Like, there's no way we don't use oil and coal and gas and other things. Like, they can be a part of it. If they're just a part of it rather than so much of it, then life can be significantly better for the whole world. Because this is going to really negatively affect definitely the poorest people in the world before it affects the rich, but it is already affecting everybody, absolutely. And the statement around electric cars, like, I think they are total distractions, because we've had 100 years to get cars to be as efficient as they are, and we've had 15 years for getting electric cars to as best as they possibly can be. So can batteries be better, and should they be better? Absolutely. Can wind farms be more recyclable and more efficient? Absolutely. And I think we're just scratching the surface. Like, if you look at what it cost for a solar panel on the space programs back in the 50 years ago, millions of dollars per square meter, right? You can go to Bunnings and buy them for your Christmas lights at 10 cents a centimetre. So all these things get better and better and better and cheaper as we get to scale and work on them. And I think they'll get better and better. And these are opportunities. And they're great opportunities for Australia, certainly, in terms of we've got great advanced manufacturing. We've lost a bit of our muscle, no doubt. But I think there's significantly more jobs in climate technology and solutions and being sustainable than there are defending the old ways. So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be tomorrow, but I think it's going to be worthwhile.
You know, these days, one thing that's obviously very, very topical is the cost of living and everything else like that. Now, a lot of people come back and say, okay, well, what you're looking at is very idealistic and it sounds pretty good. But at the end of the day, I need to pay my bills, pay my mortgage and take care of life. And from that perspective, I'm not going to go and spend extra money on bamboo sourced fabric.
Sure.
I'm going to go for Shein, Timu, really bad stuff that's going to go and pollute the earth once again.
Yeah.
And I'm going to source from there because it's simply affordable. I need to put clothes on my kids' back, and that's what I'm going to end up buying.
Yeah.
So there has to be a realistic approach to all this as well.
Beyond realistic, I think I say to climate tech entrepreneurs, if you're hoping people choose your product over another product purely on environmental reasons,
Kidding yourself.
you're kidding yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I'm one of the most privileged people in the world, and I still have a petrol car. Why do I have one? Because we don't drive very much. There's not really good options for me with a big family, and it's economical. I'd like to get one. I'll get as my next car, but it's not as easy for that to do. It is quite complicated. We've got to make better cars. You've got to make cheaper cars more available. And again, Australia hasn't had a great narrative on that. But let's look at a positive. Solar panels in Australia, highest penetration of rooftop solar. My bills are lower because I've got solar on my roofs. And ours all should be. Why should we burn coal up at Newcastle to pollute up there and ship it down a line to us when I can get it on my roof? Not all of it. So we need batteries. We need different technologies. Right now, the efficiency of that system to burn so much coal and send it down the lines in the hope that you're going to turn on this light and this equipment, we waste so much in that process. There is so much inefficiency in that, but it's worked. It's been great. It's given me, a productive life. So absolutely, I think there are two sides of that coin. One is regulation. The cost of the environment, some people say, you want to tax carbon. It's the reason to do that is because there is a cost of carbon. There is a cost of polluting. Who's bearing it right now? Currently, the environment's bearing it because we're knocking it down, and health costs. So whether it's asthma, whether it's emphysema, whether it's rising seas in the Pacific and all around the world, all those costs are being borne by other people, not the people who are actually polluting. So governments have a job in regulation. And if you look at the European Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, a taxonomy that says every product imported into Europe is going to be taxed on its full environmental costs. Plastic, water, energy. Scope 3 as well, which is basically your total cost of your customers and your suppliers. You can't get away from sitting in the middle, like Australia, selling coal into Pakistan or Bangladesh or India, China, Korea, Japan, and have them make products to sell into Europe. That tax is going to come back to bite us. So I think regulation is just starting to really genuinely kick in. It's going to take 5 to 10 years to really play out. And then that's already impacting massive companies. We work with companies, fast-moving consumer goods. if you increase their costs of plastic and water by 1%, they're unviable businesses. Like these are tight margin businesses, right? So all those companies are massively working on their supply chain because they know they've got to go in the right direction. And we're not saying throw those things out and never do it. Don't brush your teeth because we can't have toothpaste. Just make better products. Exactly to your point. And my view is 99% of the world will never know they make a climate decision. People aren't buying Teslas and going, this is a terrible car, I hate it, but you know what? It's slightly better for the environment and it's more expensive, so I better do it. It's a cool, fast car that has great acceleration and it's got cool gadgets and stuff like that. Bonus, it happens to be good for the environment. And I think that's the way. Like getting someone, I lived 3 years in the US, getting someone in Texas to be like, you know what? I'm not going to have that beef burger. I'm going to have the tofu burger instead. Not going to happen. But if the beef burger is $30 and the meat alternative burger is $20 and it tastes really good and it's really healthy, you got a shot at it, right? And that's what we say to our entrepreneurs is like, you've got to make significantly better products. That has not changed.
I actually completely agree with that. Because lately I've been looking for an electric car, right? And
Not you too, man.
yeah, I simply I'm trying my best.
gonna
And I
disown this
simply
man.
cannot find a better car to replace my current one.
Yeah.
There
Right?
you go.
It still hasn't reached that level.
Well, that's right.
And
The
it just-
products are so reliable,
yeah,
right? They
yeah,
last for years. So me throwing
100%.
my car out, it's actually worse for the environment because what's that car going to do? Like it's a stranded asset. So we've actually a huge new growing industry in Australia is actually upgrading cars to be electric, like converting them.
Okay.
It's a huge industry. Huge industry.
That's a thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can pay for any car to be converted into an EV. Absolutely.
Did not know that.
Never heard that.
Yeah,
How does
absolutely.
that- how
It's
does that
very big in
work?
Brisbane, actually. There's multiple groups. They all help each other. Like, it's not super cheap, but next to
Yeah.
buying a new car, if you love your car, it's a really good model.
Because there used to be that conversion from petrol to gas. Remember, everyone used to put their
Yeah.
gas cylinders in
that's
their
right.
boot. Yeah.
But look
Well-
at taxis, right? And taxis, I was, I get to speak to, whenever I get to jump in an Uber, I'm like, you're in an electric car. Like, I see, so much easier cheaper to run. Like, plug it in overnight, a couple of bucks. So there's a really interesting question about cost of living, right, around energy. The amount of energy that hits Sydney each day from the sun could power the earth, right? So we're not no shortage of energy. Like we know there's lots in the ground as well, and we'll use that to make stuff we really, really need. But we can also tap into these other energy sources. So at the moment, we're at a point where energy actually is more expensive because the actual full cost of the energy has been massively subsidised. We're kidding ourselves to think that we get energy on a good basis, but it's so complicated. We export energy cheaper than we buy it here in Australia.
That's true.
Like,
Really?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We-
It's a rip-off.
Stupid.
Our energy is cheaper overseas than it is in
Yeah.
Australia
Jesus.
because we'll pay for it. But also, look, 25 million people in a massive country. We're expensive because we spreading out. So versus 280 million people in Indonesia, like they've got different energy problems. But at some point, I think in the middle of the next decade, energy is going to become so cheap, it's effectively going to be free. Like the efficiency of wind and solar and hydro and all these other things, energy is going to be effectively free. Remember the days when you go to a hotel and it's like $35 for Wi-Fi for an hour, and now you're just like, if someone tried to charge you, you're like, what? Like effectively water out of the tap in Australia. We're very, very lucky again, effectively free. I think it's going to get to that point, but it's going to be a tough 10 years to get there. And recognising it's coming at a time when there's massive cost of living pressures. And again, that when we're investing in climate tech, we're investing for the end of this decade. Not all the products are going to be ready right now because the customers aren't ready right now, if that makes sense.
Is energy the biggest issue? Or are there bigger
I-
issues out there?
I think it's the biggest issue, but it's actually probably the most sorted.
Right.
And I don't want to say that in terms of like, hey, everyone relax. But there's been so much energy and money and momentum in energy and decarbonisation that has sailed. Like anyone who thinks they can go, you know what, we're gonna stop this and we're not gonna have an energy transition, it's way too late. Like that has already happened. Like Texas, even like the lowest cost energy power purchase agreement contracts were out of the Middle East. Like that, their renewable energy that they sell is massive. Like, and they've got great sun as well. So this is a diversified industry. So yeah, I think we will absolutely have lower energy costs as we go.
You know, you spoke about governments and also from a global perspective. So we have an office in Jakarta, Indonesia. So we travel there quite a bit. And during my recent visit there, someone there told me an interesting thing. They said that because of the sheer population in Jakarta CBD, they have these odd plate days and even plate days. It's
Absolutely.
quite a common theme in Asia to keep traffic flows managed. But the only vehicles that are exempt from that are EVs.
Right.
So if you drive an EV, you can have either an even or an odd numbered plate, and
Doesn't
you can
matter.
drive every single day, no issues.
Yeah.
So it's really smart how some governments are saying, look, you know what, we can two birds, one stone.
Yep.
And because you talk about air pollution, their air pollution is horrible. You can actually
Horrible.
you can sense it there.
Oh.
You travel from here and you go there and you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like I'm breathing in petroleum half the time. It's really bad.
Yeah, I don't think we appreciate, like, I think until you travel, I
Yeah.
don't think you really appreciate the size of the problems around the world. And sometimes we sit here in a bit of a bubble of space and health and clean air, clean water. Like, it is really, like, it is a massive privilege. But I went to Beijing 15 years ago, and huge issues, like massive, like literally you cannot leave your house.
Yeah.
And not because there's a fire and there's smoke. It's actually just daily pollution. But I get the other big objection I get is like, what's the point of Australia doing it? We're only 1% of the problem. And I'm like, I think that's a total cop out. Like, number one, we're leaders. Like, Australia, people look to Australia. Like, we're one of the most liked countries in the world. We're great at research and innovation. This is a big problem. And we're also going to suffer the problems. We love our Great Barrier Reef. Like, it's dying. Like, it's clearly and utterly dying. We like going to Noosa for a holiday. Like, that could be 40-degree heat for most of summer. You can't travel there. Like, it's like, we want to look after Australia in all respects. So I think people are absolutely looking to Australia for those model. And also we can play a leadership role, and we sell a lot of fossil fuels and mining products to the world. Like, we also need to take responsibility for that. But we're a part of it, right? We're a part of this. Environmental problems don't stop at the borders. Like, so this is a global problem. We literally have to work together on it.
Do you feel that the countries that are the largest polluters are the ones that have, economically, they're probably the weakest? To say, okay, well, you look at out of some of the Asian countries, some of the subcontinental countries, that's where a lot of the pollution comes from. And that's where I think it goes back to the point that you raised earlier about how, little Australia over here, what difference can we make when we are 10% of Indonesia's population, 10% of Pakistan's population? We don't really matter size or scale. So how do countries like Australia support those countries that they have so much more sort of grievous issues?
Yeah.
And they've got, poverty and education and sanitation and all that is a huge concern for them. And when Australia talks about sort of lording over them their obligations of their CO2 emissions or whatever it is, they say, look, you can go park that. We've got people dying on the street over here. We're not going to worry about your little, nice to haves.
Yeah. Well, I think because it's so related to health, it's no longer a nice to have. Like, I think that link, and this is the reason why governments are able to act on it, there is an absolute clear cost of plastics. Like, it's a triple cost. You pollute when you make it, you have to go pick it up and transport it around, and it pollutes in the oceans and gets back in out of things. Like, the average male in the world has plastic in his testes. Most fetuses now have plastics in the developed and across the whole world. Like, these are real problems that are having massive real impacts. If you talk to people in hospitals and health, and you look at the things that are not being looked after, health, education, and the environment, like, they're things we've just taken for granted. Absolutely, I think in those countries are both participating in, but also bearing the heavier costs for that. But Australia, if the whole world consumed like Australia did, we'd need 5 planets of Earth. Like the US, like 10 to 11 planets. Like, you think Australia might not be great, and then you go to the US and it's like plastic, but bottles like throw. It's just like mass consumption, mass pollution. So I think those countries, I think even though if you might say China and India with such large populations are currently polluting more, you look at the history of contributions to emissions and actually what's driving those emissions, like China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Korea, Japan, they export a lot of products to the world, and like that is our manufacturing hub. So that, again, you can't pull it apart. Nothing stops at the borders. Like, trade doesn't stop at the borders, money doesn't stop at the borders, and pollution doesn't stop at the borders. And my view is the opportunity and responsibility doesn't stop at the borders as well.
And a lot of people these days say, I'm going to die soon, so like, who cares about the earth? That's a next generation's problem.
Yeah.
Right? And earlier you mentioned you're doing it for your kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, we live in a selfish world. I say this a lot. Like, we live in a very selfish world. Like, people genuinely don't care.
Yeah.
Be it, the Earth's health,
Yeah.
be it other people's feelings. Like people generally don't care
Yeah.
about anything these days.
Sure.
Very selfish centric. You'd agree with that, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people that are like,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm gonna die soon anyway. That's a problem for the next generation.
How soon? Like, we went down and got a cup of coffee before. How many liters of water do you think it makes to make a cup of coffee?
How many liters of water?
Yeah.
Cup of coffee?
Yeah. Just one cup of coffee. How many liters of water to grow?
Yeah, you got to
Got
incorporate the beans, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I'll not have a clue. Then. No.
140 liters of water is required to make one cup of coffee.
Really?
So I'm saying as an example of someone who likes to drink my coffee, right? I like chocolate. I like wine. I like to travel. Like all these things that motivate me. Like absolutely for my kids and I want like as a dad, you want to leave the world in a better place. And I was working my ass off, so financially I can leave my kids in a great position. Like worked it off, like nailed it. I'm not massively wealthy, but privileged and lucky enough. Great. I'm a good dad. I got to spend time with them. Good relationship with them. Great. But the world absolutely is. If we don't act, if we don't continue to act, it's going to be not the same world at all. Like glaciers are melting. I got to climb Mount Kilimanjaro 20 years ago. It's going to be melting. You're not going to go there. Great Barrier Reef probably gone in the next 10 years. Like serious issues. And I don't care what motivates people. Everyone's going to have a moment. There was a bit of a joke on the Onion News that if you've seen it, like it was like the average American needs to be personally impacted by the environment every 14 minutes to care. And it's a stupid joke, but it's the reality, right? Because you walk around every day, you're like, oh my God, there's a bushfire and a flood and a storm, and look at the sea level rising. Like, but I tell you what, you got to try to insure your house. You got beach houses. This is the funny thing about like wealthy people. Like I've traveled the world and they're like, oh yeah, we've got a place down in Florida and the beach is gone. Or had one guy, like massively wealthy guys, like, well, I went to buy my favorite wine and they said it's not available this year because they can't grow it in the same spot. I was like, that's quite inconvenient. You're like, yeah,
You
poor
think so?
you, buddy. Like, but everything, right? Everything, food security, all the things. What do you like? Whatever food you like, rice. 20% of the world's calories is in rice, right? And to talk about feeding Indonesia, massive water issues, massive methane release, like massive insect issues of actually when climate changes. Like small changes could have horrific effects. And the key thing again is we're saying make small changes, and those small changes are racing against the tipping points of the environment. So that the Antarctica is like masses of ice. People go, yeah, it's a lot of snow, right? People think it's like Perisher or something, right? Or it's like not. It's a whole massive island of thick ice. And the tundra in Siberia has been frozen for like hundreds of years. And this is the big debate we can get to about the world's temperature's always been changing. But like it's been frozen for thousands of years and has so much methane caught up into it. If that thaws, it's going to release like so much methane that'll actually like it's irreversible because you can't just rethaw Siberia, right? You can't rethaw Antarctica. So all those things are actually tipping points that we're just trying to defend against. And the key thing I come back to is we're not saying stop all progress, stop living your life, stop eating and doing other good things, just make changes. Can we make sustainable coffee? Absolutely. I love travel. I turned 50 this year. I had a big goal to get to 50 countries before I turned 50. I'm at 48. Air travel, like massively expensive for the environment. Should I stop doing that? Yes, until we get sustainable aviation fuel. So I offset it until we get to that, right? And there's times when I'm clearly being a bit of a hypocrite with that, but I spend my day trying to work on solutions so we can back to your point, no one has to wake up and go, I better go bankrupt and not eat food so I can make it buy my bamboo-based t-shirt, right? But maybe don't buy 5 t-shirts a year just because it's got a cool slogan on it. Like maybe buy 3. Like just like modifications towards that, if that makes sense.
Is there like work to actually make flying sustainable?
Absolutely.
Like, it's actually happening right
Qantas
now?
has got a $400 million fund, like massive efforts going into this. Sustainable aviation fuel and electric planes. Like you go to Japan now and Beijing, I think, you can actually get flying taxis to like 5 different locations around the city because traffic sucks, right? You're like, hey, you can get flying taxis. They are like cheaper than jumping into a petrol car. Like they're amazing. Autonomous vehicles. So many cars are out there just driving around the road looking for parking. Like there's all these things that are absolutely coming around. Sustainable aviation fuel, whether it's biofuels and all these other things, Australia's actually leading the way. We're doing some incredible work in that area. There's a great company, Kite Magnetics, down in Melbourne, making electric planes for medium length flights. Like they are just, again, some great technologies. We can solve it. We totally can solve it. This is why I get optimistic about it. Try not to, like, I have a goal, less than 5% on the problem, right? And I know we've been focusing a little bit on the problem here, but we can go and solve it. Like, if it's an emergency, if there was a legitimate emergency, like right now, if it was like, oh my God, there's a fire, we'd all react to it, right? The issue is the narrative, and I was an ex-marketing guy, so in 2050, the temperature is going to go up 2 degrees. Like, talk about your like selfish, I don't care problem. That's a long way away.
And
at 2 degrees,
yeah,
like,
seemingly small.
tiny. But if my child has a 2-degree fever, yeah, you might take him to the hospital, right? Like, it's what does that genuinely mean? And 2050, we're screwed by 2050. We either solve it now or it doesn't matter. And I think to your point around energy, is that the real thing? So much effort's going to energy. I think that's actually, we're on a really good trajectory. We've got to start investing in carbon capture and storage. We've got to invest in adaptation and resilience and natural capital biodiversity.
Let's talk about the investing part of it all. So part of obviously your expertise and background is that you're going out there building a business around this. Now, obviously businesses, in order for them to grow and particularly to scale and to actually be meaningful, they need to attract private equity, VC, all that kind of stuff. How do you feel the deep-pocketed sort of family offices and all those kind of insto fund managers and all that, you know, where are they in their headspace around this particular topic? And do they feel that it's something that, number one, is genuinely an issue, number two, is an attractive investment to make? Because at the end of the day, they're thinking there with their pockets, with their members' best interest, with their terms in mind and all that kind of stuff, right? If they don't make a buck for their investors, you know, they get sacked and someone moves on. So
exactly.
How do you see that tension playing out?
The likelihood that any fund manager chooses a less profitable, sustainable fund over a more profitable one is the same as a Texan eating a veggie burger, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. And we are in the middle of a transition away from this being environmental, green tree huggers into a legitimate business. But I think there's been, yes, solar and clean tech 1.0 was pretty tough in a lot of ways because it ended up being actually commodity products that were like largely manufactured in China. So it's like there wasn't as much innovation in that. But look at, like, Tesla's done quite well. There's actually a large number of companies that are doing quite well. I think it's in terms of where the investors are at the moment, there is a lot of interest. There has been a lot of deployment. There's been, you know, billions and billions of dollars of capital being deployed. It needs to be $1 trillion, but looking at like a company like Sightline, which was climate tech VC, got a lot of good data about the billions and billions of dollars going into investment. Europe is really, really well advanced, and we know that, probably 10 years at least across the rest of the world. We were in Paris in March, and there were big companies and investors walking around, and they were again so advanced they were just basically buying. They wanted to buy products right now, so they weren't considering it and thinking about that maybe it's a future trend. They were doing it right now. The USA, with the Inflation Reduction Act, has actually driven a boom in the USA as well. So USA, again, have great innovation. They've got great entrepreneurship. They've also got great energy management. So all those things are combining with this government regulation and support to drive more innovation as well. Australia has been quite negative. We know that we make so much money out of fossil fuels and mining that we've been more incentivized to look after that than to actually invest in these other sides. But the state's actually been really, really strong, and federally we've obviously had a bit of positive change. You used to lose elections by being climate positive, then we win elections, and I think that's going to be the case going forward. Big debate over nuclear and other things, which is another 4-hour conversation. But so I think the issue is timing. And I say this to the entrepreneurs we work with. We've got 625 companies in Climate Salad. They're all trying to solve businesses build businesses in their own direction. So we don't build businesses directly. We're trying to support them. The big question for them is, and it goes to something like energy. Are you building an EV charger that can be plugged into someone's house right now and sell it tomorrow? Or are you building a hydrogen electrolyzer, which is going to take 2 or 3 years to commercialize and then roll out and get growth? And where are the customers? So more important than the investment is where is the customers, because they'll always follow that. And my view is that there are some products like EVs and solar, infrastructure, wind, hydro, that are like $1 trillion industries right now. And a lot of them are emerging over the next 2, 5, 10 years. So if you think about comparative to the web, in the late 90s, big bubble. Lots of money went in, pets.com. So I use this analogy a little bit. I'm not sure how well it goes, but like pets.com was like, everyone's going to buy their pet stuff online, give us $1 billion and we'll build a great company. They were absolutely right, except for the timing. People now spend billions of dollars online.
Not there.
It took 15 years.
Yeah.
And so that is the big question and this is what why a lot of investors and family offices we work with are saying, I might wait because they don't know if they're investing in pets.com or in Amazon. My view is it's a little bit different because the world wasn't forcing everyone to go online to buy pet food. Sustainability and regulation is driving people to adopt these products. So I think it's going to be faster. And it's also, the products aren't about a whole new behavior change. So some of them are, but a lot of them are about, I'm going to go look for a car. I look for 2 cars. And Scandinavia, they've got more than 60% electric cars. Petrol cars have range anxiety in Scandinavia in some countries because petrol stations start closing down. So the choice then is actually quite a different one to here in Australia. But that there's a lot of products I think that are ripe and ready right now, and a lot that are emerging over the next few years. I think at the moment, because there's a lull in investment and an upcoming growth, like regulation-driven growth in multiple trillion-dollar industries, I think we'll be looking back in 2030. We'll look back at this period of time and say it was probably one of the most best value times to invest in this space. The critical thing is, and this is a really big trap for first-time investors in innovation, they want to do innovation like they might do property investment. Find a great property, put all your money into it, do it up, and then sell it.
Yeah.
Whereas in innovation, you've got to invest in at least 20 companies. You've got to invest in a portfolio. Like so VCs and all, like a hedge fund waits very much later, right? Private equity, all those groups. But venture and angel investing and even family offices, you've got to be investing across 20 because of the risk profile. And in that 20, you have one absolutely brilliant company. That doesn't mean just go invest into 20 random companies. Still got to work your butt off to find great companies, and have a thesis and support them over time. But you've got to invest in a range of companies. I had a big investor say to me, he's like, Mick, you've got 5 companies that work in circular economy, waste management. Which one's going to win? I said, I don't know. I'm putting money into all of them. He's like, what? Yeah. I said, I'm going to invest in all of them. Like, I don't like the analogy. I don't like gambling very much, but it's like a horse race. You put $1 on each horse to start the race.
Prove your odds.
Halfway through the race, I'm going to put $100 on the first 10. 20 meters to go, you put $1,000 on the top 3, because you can do that as an investor. But trying to pick in something like innovation, the putting $1 million onto the first horse onto one horse, it doesn't make like you need portfolio and patience. So it's really complex time. I think we've got great companies. I would like them to be investing. I'm not the person sitting here with $1 billion in my pocket, so I don't get to decide. But I think they are legitimate businesses. That's the number one thing. That this is not a charity. That this is not positive for the environment. These are great businesses that are climate positive, not climate positive businesses that might be good businesses.
Yeah, I feel that the capital inflows will over time improve by virtue of the fact that we're having this massive intergenerational transfer of wealth as well. So a lot of the older generation who are the naysayers who said, you know what, I'll be gone soon, like what Ali said, and it's like, well, who really cares? Their kids are now inheriting those billions, trillions of dollars and saying, okay, well, I believe in climate change because I grew up understanding fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff, and saying, okay, well, this is a real thing, it's not a fad, and I'll put my money where my mouth is and actually make a tangible difference.
Yeah. That's already happening.
So you start to see that coming through.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the UK that said by 2030 or something, all new car sales need to be electric.
Yeah.
Was it the UK? Europe? Somewhere in
Most countries in the world are that.
Yeah. So do you think that maybe there has to be a point in time where governments need to pretty much force their countries to actually make changes?
Well, that's what they're doing with those models. Like it is the more populated smaller countries have just massive pollution and traffic issues as well, and also noise pollution, like this noisy cars. So it's definitely going in that direction. Australia's a bit harder because we've got we drive on the other side of the road, and not many people drive on that side of the road. So it actually makes it harder, right? Like you've got to make cars specifically for Australia, and we have some of the lowest fuel efficiency standards of the world.
Okay.
And partly because we've got lots of sky, right? So we've got lots of air to throw it into. But Jakarta, no way. Like the fuel efficiency really, really genuinely matters there. So, so it's really worth having a look at the carbon border adjustment mechanism in Europe. That taxonomy is absolutely and utterly driving huge behaviour across all multinational corporates of the world, and also director responsibility. Like we speak to Australian Institute of Company Directors. Directors are very worried that if they're saying, this is going to make us more profit, but it's going to cost the environment, that will not cut it anymore. And to your point around governments, if you go for government tenders, it used to be like, what's the cheapest, decent, and are you good for the environment? Maybe it's a bonus if it's everything's equal, but like that's going to be a baseline. You have to meet these standards if you want to get this project. So it really, really takes time. Like all these things, like we're talking about, you think the internet changes everything? Talk about changing agriculture, like multiple crops, like just different ways to do agriculture, using soil. Like companies like Loam Bio have changed the way we look at soil, and just changing soil can sequester all the carbon for the US aviation industry, just by changing the way we do soil on existing agriculture. Like just these minor changes, but that's a huge change for an entire industry, right? And then you've got all cars, changing all cars, and the infrastructure to change that around Australia. Like it is huge. Like, and again, we've had 100 years to build all the petrol stations and everything, and to get used to using it. It's not going to happen in a day, and that's okay. But we want to stop blocking it. We want to start being open to it, and we want to start taking positive steps to it. So, and I think there's a really important dynamic between all the big parts. And I think one big thing I hear from people is, I'm just one person out of 8 billion. Like, how can I make a difference? And I think we massively underestimate our influence on a number of fronts. We are consumers. So when you go in, when you're like, hey, here are two products. This one's got a biodegradable plastic cover and this one doesn't. It's roughly the same. What do I care? I'll grab the one that way. Like the signal has already gone to branding that it's no longer a tiny niche. Like you see it all in the media, everything. Everyone's going after that. So consumer spending is a huge one. The second one is actually employee power. One of the biggest reasons people are leaving fossil fuel friendly companies is because they're going, I don't want to work for a negative company. I want to work for a positive company. And you can't get away with it by just having a green logo on your homepage with a couple of trees, right? It's going to come out. Working for a fossil fuel company for a younger generation is worse than working for a tobacco company, right? So huge issues. And that's the really bad extreme, but every company needs to be climate positive. The third one is investing. Putting your super into where you put your super, you might make a little bit more money in the short term in terms of being investing more broadly, but billions and billions and billions, trillions of dollars globally is being redirected because people are saying, no, I don't want to benefit from that. Now, again, it's actually more smaller amounts of money than it is the big amounts of money, because people actually, I think they're the ones who are going to have the cost of it. And also banking, and not everyone can go out and invest in $1 million into 20 startups, but philosophically there are other ways to do that as well. And the final one, of course, is voting. So the votes matter, local, state, federal. We know that absolutely, certainly Europe, certainly Southeast Asia. Like we're seeing it in the media, people saying we're unhealthy because of pollution. You might not directly link that to full climate change. That's a massive, massive, complicated issue. But just fixing cars and emissions and pollutions can make a big difference. So again, I think everyone is much more powerful and influential than we imagine.
So can't the government be like, in 15 years' time, this needs to be done. Start investing into this industry.
They are. Like we've got the National Reconstruction Fund, the Made in Australia policy. Like I think and we've had Australian Renewable Energy Agency and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation for like 10 years. And they've done amazing work to develop brand new technologies. Out of UNSW here in Sydney, the most efficient photovoltaic solar cell in the world was developed. Like incredible technology. GoTerra in Canberra uses maggots to eat food waste and turn it into chicken feed and fertilizer. So here's a company, Woolworths pay her to take their food waste away.
Okay.
It makes chicken feed and she sells it. It makes fertilizer, she sells it, and she gets a carbon credit. She gets paid 4 times for the one product. Like, and this is developed in Australia. Like Olympia from GoTerra, like just has amazing products. So I think it's happening. All those things are coming together, and there are bigger ones, right? There are bigger ones around home electrification. There's no way, this will cause a lot of controversy, no way anyone should have a gas stove in their house. Like, I'm an asthmatic. Sitting next to a gas stove is like standing next to a smoker. Like, they're really bad. I don't even know how they ever got legalized, right? Like, we should all have electric stoves. We should all have electric cars, quieter, better for the environment. Even if you charge it from fossil fuels, it's still better for the environment. Charge it with solar, even better. Solar gets even better. We have microgrids, and we're all sharing technology locally with sharing energy locally with batteries. Even better. You can drive around Australia for like $50 if you charge it the right way. Mm-hmm. Can you drive from Adelaide to Northern Territory right now really easily with lots of stops along the way? No, but you can probably drive in a petrol car like that with the same way. So, but easier. So we're on this journey, and the government again. It's hard because you've got these massive cost of living pressures, and you've got billions of dollars we make from royalties from selling oil and gas and coal. Like, that's a lot of money. Like, to saying no to that is a material. I don't have to make that decision. That's a huge thing. And we're not saying turn it off today. We're just saying make a transition. Like, we think it's better for everybody long term. And the key thing that I keep coming back to is the world's already decided. Europe's decided. China, Japan, Korea, Singapore's definitely decided. A lot of Southeast Asia. I was speaking to a team from Vietnam yesterday. They're like, this is critical for us. Transition, the government are right behind it, pushing it. Can you bring all your Australian companies to Vietnam? Like, we're getting more interest from Vietnam than in Australia because they're already seeing those big effects. USA's definitely decided. Canada, like, again, the world's a big complicated place and affects people in different ways. But for us to think that we can avoid it and avoid it for a long period of time, I think is a fallacy.
I think on the electric stove topic, I think if electric stoves had the power of a gas stove, I think more people would move towards them. I've tried it sort of at home or even with my mum, and she's like, I ain't using an electric stove because it can't brew this thing as quickly, or it can't boil this thing as quickly, or whatever it is. So some people are just stuck in their ways.
Sure.
But I want to ask you a question. You earlier in the conversation, you said about moving from a beef burger to a tofu burger, or a vegan burger, whatever it is. My limited ecosystem understanding is that, okay, these cows that exist out there are what happens to them, and then what happens to the whole biodiversity and the ecosystem overall if we're not slaughtering them for their meat?
Yeah.
Does that not harm them, and then does that not have other implications on the overall biodiversity of the world? So by solving one issue that we've studied up and we've understood, are we not then creating other problems that we have not yet ascertained?
Yeah, look, second order impacts, it's really hard, right? There's definitely there are huge issues with that. Like, there is big risks, I think. I think cows are probably an easy one. Like, 99% of cows in the world are birthed and grown and slaughtered purely for food. So if we change that, and again, I spoke at my son's school, and one of the kids said, we're a cattle farmer, what are you saying? And it's like, I think cattle farmers critical. We actually definitely need them. I love to very, very, very occasionally eat some red meat, but it's a matter of scale. If the whole world ate meat like we ate meat, then you would need all of Australia to be a cattle farm. So can we cut that back and stop actually deforesting to put up new cattle farms in Brazil and around the world because we occasionally eat a veggie burger? Just like even like the impact of meatless Mondays of the world, a small population eating a little bit less meat has been massive. So if everyone can just have a few less meat meals, that makes a huge difference. So cows are actually, there's absolutely no question, if everyone dropped 80% of meat consumption, especially red meat, like red meat is far worse because of burping and farting. Sorry to say, you might have to burp that. Like, that is far worse than everything, but also it takes thousands of kilograms of vegetables to feed a cow to get 1 kilo of meat. So you need to go, like, the impacts, like the bigger impacts of it is actually really, really, really large. So, but we do want to get to moderation, right? You do want to have, you do want to get it back to something that's actually quite much more scalable. And what's the alternative? If you're actually building things in a lab, or if you're growing tofu and you've got to cut down more forest to grow more tofu. Like
That's the thing.
there are
Yeah.
some things which are actually much less effective, but we've just got to. We can't say don't try to find an alternative because that might not be very good. We've actually got to just apply ourselves to thinking about it. And one really interesting thought process around this is that I like to use. When movies first came out, they used to film plays because that was like the obvious thing to do, right? It's like, oh, we've got video, there's a play. And someone's like, we don't have to actually be here, right? So think about where we are now with movies and how massive how they've developed. I think we're at the filmed plays stage of climate tech. Like we've got, there's a problem and we've got some solutions. Let's apply those. But I think as we develop over the next 5-10 years, our thinking and a younger generation who are, as you said, they are born environmentalists, right? Forget digital natives. They are environmental natives. Like you do not have to convince them at all versus my dad's generation, absolutely and utterly like, what are you talking about? So I think when you apply that whole generation and that enthusiasm, the problems, the financing, the regulation, and you go, do you know what? What if we did it completely differently and did it this way and this way, this way? It would be sustainable and a tastier burger and we'd look after cows. Oh my God, like we've just never had to look at the thing with that lens, right? We've just so taken it for granted. And I think there's some incredible innovations to do over the top of that, which will answer all those questions. So it should be, you've got to take into consideration all the possible second order effects and you've got to monitor them and you've got to make sure there are some things that are probably a transition and that's okay as well. I will touch on it really briefly. If Australia had a nuclear industry, I'd be completely supportive of it because it's better than fossil fuels, no doubt. We don't, and it typically takes 25 to 30 years to get one. So for us to do that now, it's like I'll build a gym for 30 years and then I'll get really, really fit. You're like, why don't you just do push-ups now? Like it's like, so touching it very, very briefly, I'm not anti-nuclear. I think if we had it, it'd be great.
But you are Team Dutton.
No, definitely not Team Dutton. It's just not going to solve our problems. Like it is so expensive, so time consuming, and in Australia it's actually illegal, federally illegal in states, each state, to find a location, actually build it. The last ones are like 3 times over in time and money. I just think it's actually a distraction. And we've got alternatives. If it was nuclear or no alternatives, but we've got so much sun. People say, but what about Canada? You're like, we have more sun than Canada. And Canada has had a nuclear industry since the 70s. So of course you'd keep it, but yeah. So again, really complicated, and I don't know the answers. Studying a Master's of Sustainable Development, the more I read, the more I realise I don't know. Like, I got professors who've done 17 years to work out soil sequestration in mangroves. Like the dedication they have to that, and I believe them based on studying their stuff. But it is massively complicated, and that's like 1% of it. So. Yeah, it's really complicated, but I think it's a great opportunity for Australia to create lots of good jobs. The new industry, the world's going this direction, and the outcomes are cleaner air, cleaner water, should be cheaper energy, should be more food security, should be more options. Like we should be thinking about it being more, not less.
Mick, now I kind of want you to educate me with this question.
Yeah,
because I don't know these things. The ozone layer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about it. Apparently it's getting damaged and whatnot. Like how?
Yeah.
And why? Like, is it a real thing?
See, that's an outcome of wagging Year 7 science.
Yes.
You see, they taught it in high school,
Exactly.
believe it or not.
It's really interesting. Like sometimes I get people on Twitter going, "Well, what about the ozone layer? All the scientists complained about that, and now it's not a problem." And the reality is, yeah, it was a problem. We changed regulation, we created new products, and now it's not a problem. So we were using kinds of gases in our aerosols and in fridges. Refrigeration and air conditioning, like massive issues, like massive issues that they cause just like so much. And it's going to get worse, right? The hotter the world gets, the more air conditioning you need, and more refrigeration you need. But basically we were like, the gases we're using are actually creating this impact in the stratosphere, in our environment. We should find an alternative. Here's an alternative. Does it cause the problems of ozone layer? No? Great. Did your fridge change? Did people not have air conditioning? So we fixed it. Now everyone's like, this is the really interesting thing. People are like, but the ozone layer is not a problem now because we regulated and we changed products. like 20 years ago. Like, that's why we don't talk about it, because it's being repaired. But it was really serious. Like, it's absolutely.
So it's not an issue anymore.
It's not that it's not an issue. Like, it's a part of the environment. We've got to be
Right.
really careful, because there are other things like, methane is massively worse for the environment than carbon dioxide, but it also disappears faster. It's really this stuff is super complicated. Again, I've spent months trying to understand just some of it, and you're like, oh my God, I'm just glad the scientists are really working hard. But like the summary is, ozone layer was an issue. We identified it, we fixed it, we moved on. Now there are other issues. We've identified them. Let's work at the products, and then we can move on with our lives. Like, again, it's not either or. We're not saying fix the environment and have a horrible life. We're saying you can have both. We just got to make some changes.
To me, I think the everyday Joe is struggling with, as I said earlier, cost of living, but also now there's this confusion between, we've had people come on the podcast who are from the health industry, health sector, and they're over there talking about, improving your iron levels through eating red meat, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about environmental sustainability and saying, okay, well, no more, beef.
Yeah.
So no more red meat and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And there's always this sort of, paradoxical kind of conversations happening. And I think it leaves most people in a lurch somewhere in between to say, okay, well, should I or should I not? Because I know, for example, he enjoys the sound of his AMG, Merc,
Sure.
but he's like, I'm not going to give that sound up
Sure.
for some little bzz, little EV. And that's the thing. Like, you can
It's not
convert
even
the...
a buzz, man. That's
Nothing. It's just,
yeah,
it sounds
a
like
bit
air.
Exactly.
So and that's the thing, right? And then you come to a point where you're like, you know what? Life's pretty short, and I want to enjoy it.
yeah.
And I want to enjoy my loud vroom car.
Now I'm actually considering getting a V8. Like, I got that
Exactly,
annoyed.
go the other
I
way.
couldn't find an electric. I'm like, I might as well get a V8
Yeah.
right before they get rid of it.
Before they get rid of it.
But the torque on electric is pretty good, right? So acceleration is pretty good. So there are positives. Again, it's about moderation. So no one, like, there are some people definitely. The more people become vegan, the better it is for the environment. Hoping that people becoming vegan is going to save us is not going to do it. But if we can find meat alternatives, people can reduce their meat, and we can actually, even if you go to Grilled Burger, I don't know if they've still got it now. They did it as a test. There was this a burger they had, which was a burger fed asparagopolis. So this Canadian farmer, his cows got away. I mean, who thought Canadians had cows, right? The cows got away and went to a beach. So now we've got a beach in Canada. So it sounds like even less likely to happen. But I look it up, it's true. Cows get away, go to the beach, eat all this seaweed, and he notices that they're burping and farting less. And he's like, that's really interesting. Like, all these cows got away, they ate all this seafood. Now there's this trillion-dollar industry called asparagopolis, which is if you put some seaweed additive into cow feed, they burp and fart less. And that's less methane going out into the world. A really tasty burger, still from beef. It's just a better burger, right? And I still eat meat. I just drop my meat intake. I try to eat three meat meals a day. I went to Jimmy's Falafel today and had an awesome veggie lunch. Like, I'm not saying don't eat a hamburger and don't drive your Merc, but Merc and BMW, all those companies are absolutely committed, because Europe, nearly every European country is going EVs only. So there's no way Europe's going to go, oh, Australia still wants your V8s? No problems. We'll make them just for Australia. Like, there's no way. Like, looking at where all the cars come from in the world, we don't make that many in Australia. Zero,
Yeah,
actually,
Nick,
right?
I got something funny. Wade just sent me something, right? So apparently Kim Kardashian, right? She flew to Paris to eat her favorite, was it cheesecake?
Yeah.
I heard about
Cheesecake.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then flew back home.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe the same day or something, right?
Yeah.
And here we are worrying about, using
know.
paper straws to
Yeah.
drink our Macca's Coke from.
Yep.
Right? So I'm doing my part, let's say.
Yep.
And then there's a devil out there that's like doing 10 times my job,
100
but
times
worse.
worse. Yeah, exactly.
Right? We can never win.
Well,
Nick.
look, there's no doubt that it is slanted, right? Definitely the top 1% pollutes massively more than the rest of the 99% put together. Like, there's no question about that. But the impacts are felt by everybody. Like, if you like going to Europe in the Australian winter, like, they've had the 5th year of heat waves. Like, that's material. People on the Greek islands, I'm going to go to Greek islands. What a great holiday. Like, fires. Fires have happened all the time, Mick. They are significantly more regular, significantly bigger. Australia and North America used to share bushfire fighting equipment because you only needed it for your season. That's not possible anymore because the seasons are so variable and so wide. These impacts are like, she might be sitting there thinking, I'm so wealthy, it's not going to impact me. But absolutely, probably she'll never know it because she'll get on the plane, fly over for a cheesecake, fly back, and it'll be sustainable aviation fuel because regulation made it so. She'll still, what the platform is of the day in 10 years' time. But in 3 years' time, we could have sustainable aviation fuel. For me, it's not an excuse not to do it. Like, all those things are changing. I think everyone can play their role. And I think people want to think about it in their own lives. Like, if you're running a business or if you're an investor, these things are coming. It's worth just getting some education across. Are you going to fail tomorrow with your total investment portfolio if it's not 100% green? No. But the risk of not thinking about the environment and the benefit of actually thinking positively about it, the delta between those two is getting bigger and bigger every year. Like, that's absolutely true. So, and then the third thing, I find this like triple storm that's affecting people is this, the risk of what if I don't act, the possible benefits if I do act, and then in a personal instance, personal experience. So whether it's somebody caught, like seeing the bushfires in Australia, I went to Great Barrier Reef and went with a marine scientist and went down and looked at the reef. And you're like, you go from top to bottom, and you're like, it's like bleached and it's like dying and it's okay. But every year it's getting worse and worse. We used to have bleaching incidences every 10, 15 years. Now we have them every 2 or 3 years. They can't recover. Like, I love the Great Barrier Reef. Will my life go on if the Great Barrier Reef dies? Sure. But it just sucks a little bit more, right? And then you go into Europe on a holiday, going up to Cairns for a holiday, like all those things are going to affect us. And they're going to affect the Kardashians. Like, maybe she's not out there doing it at the moment, and it is really frustrating because there's some people who are out there being vegan, they're driving an EV, doing everything they can. But I do think it adds up. I do think that adds up. And when you combine it again with regulation and the compound interest on both those things, I absolutely believe we're going to get there.
Now, Mick, to wrap this podcast up, I have one last question.
Sure.
Right. You have great answers for everything, right? You're like really good answers for everything, right?
Yeah.
And this is off topic.
Yeah.
But I want you to answer it because you know what? You give great answers.
Sure, yeah.
Did we land on the moon?
Did we land on the moon? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we landed on the moon.
Did we actually?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we've got evidence of things that came from the moon, or the data and information we had, and we've had multiple countries go to the moon. Like, we've had multiple countries recently land other things on the moon. So to think that we couldn't do it previously, the really interesting question is what stopped us going back to the moon? Like, because if we went there, and I think it's interesting for science, right? Because you're like, we got to the moon, like, wow, we did it, look at this, and you're like, oh, we're not going to live here. It's really expensive to get here. There's mainly dust.
The pollution
and rocks.
on that would have been crazy.
There is.
The space.
There is.
Spaceship.
Like, the moon is more polluted per capita than any other part because there's no people.
There's
there.
no capita.
Yeah. But there is lots of pollution. They dumped a lot of stuff there. There's rubbish. Like, there's a golf ball. There's like all their rubbish they left on the moon. Like, how's that bad? Like, we haven't even moved there yet, and we're already polluting other parts of the universe. So, we did land on the moon.
Land on the moon. Yeah. There we go, guys. Confirmed. Mick said it.
Exactly. In his vast knowledge, I have no idea. But yeah. Awesome.
Any last words, Mick? Anything you want to say? Any nice message you have for people?
Yeah, I think people are going to have different reactions to all of this, and I think that's okay. Look, go to climatesalad.com. We've got a directory of over 600 Australian companies. Find one of those companies and have a conversation. Like, find a company that either you're not sure about, you're like, is that really correct? And have a conversation with someone who's deep within it. And if you can help that company, if you can become a customer, an investor, a mentor, or a partner, like, I guarantee you'll enjoy the journey. Like, some of this technology, MJ Thermal out of Newcastle University have developed an energy brick that can be used hundreds of times to heat a turbine or to run an industrial plant. Like, out of Newcastle University, like, made this brick that's like, it's like coal with 0 emissions and 100 times use and can be recycled at the end of it. Like, there's just some amazing technology. And what I love to do is actually just get people, like, no matter what you think about anything, this is the legitimate company building a product the customers are buying. Like, it takes everything else away. Like, it's better in all regards. Like I think that's a great finish is if they have a look, contact me, whatever you want to do, I'll help you have a conversation. If at the end of that you go, not for me, no problems. What we have now versus 3 years ago when we started Climate Salad is a massive industry. We've got investors. There's 10 funds raising right now for climate tech funds. There's super funds that focus on it. There's accounting firms, law firms, marketing firms, recruiting firms. Government know it's important and valuable. We're importing capital, exporting products. It's a regional business. This is all really positive. If I can help, reach out.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Great message. Thank you so much, Mick.
Thanks, Sam.
Really,
It's been
really,
awesome.
really do appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Now I'm gonna put Muzza on the spot.
Yeah.
Pronounce his surname, Muzza.
Did you remember?
I don't remember the name.
Yeah. Liubinskas.
Liubinskas.
Oh, you got it? Yeah, awesome. Mick Liubinskas. Yeah. Reach out, say hello.
Thank you for your time, Mick.
No,
I'm
thanks.
so
Great
thankful
to
for it.
have a
Really
chat.
appreciate it. It's a great chat. Honestly, you're the first person that I spoke about the environment that didn't end up in a fight. Because usually they're always so defensive and like forceful of their
They're radical.
opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty
get it.
crazy. And like you've done it in such an educational way.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? Right.
Yeah.
It's great chat. Thank you so much for it.
It's hard. Like once you see under the bonnet, we're going back to the car reference. Once you see under the bonnet, it's you can't unsee it. But I don't want to go home each day to my kids and wife and go, hey, let me tell you how the world's going to suck. Like, and the other thing is, I'm an entrepreneur. Either go fix it or don't. Like, don't just sit in the corner and cry about
Yeah.
it. Like, go fix the problem if you legitimately think there is one, and that's what I want to focus on. But
Yeah.
thanks, Keith. Great conversation.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Mick.
Cheers.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did, give us a like, subscribe, comment, give us a review as well. It means the world to us. Until then, we'll see you guys in the next one.